Xander J. Hobson here, stand-up comedian, entertainer, director and producer of boxing documentaries, internet troll to those who need internet trolling. This is another episode of The Devil's Advocate brought to you by the Brilliant Artist Movement. Folks, listen, subscribe, like this video, share it, and by all means, leave a comment in the comment section. So, you might be interested to know that one of my favorite all-time novels is The Great Gatsby. I think in my lifetime, I probably read this book or watched the movie or the story or something thereof probably more than 50 times. And every time I read this book, I always get something new out of it. The Great Gatsby was written in 1925 by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I believe I'm pronouncing the guy's name right. F. Scott Fitzgerald was a guy who fell in love with this chick who was a socialite, a debutante, but he wasn't allowed to marry her because this chick was from old money. Well, the book, The Great Gatsby, is pretty much based on this failed romance between F. Scott Fitzgerald and his chick. And he basically reinvented himself and put it in the novel, and he called himself The Great Gatsby. Well, although the book is eponymously named after James Gatz or The Great Gatsby, the focal point of the book is the character Nick Carraway. Nick Carraway is a guy who strikes up a friendship with The Great Gatsby, and basically Nick is the paparazzi, and he's basically telling everyone about the wonderful and interesting life of The Great Gatsby. Jay Gatz, or The Great Gatsby, is a guy from a North Dakota town who always had dreams of doing something really big with his life. At 17 years of age, he hops a yacht and he starts sailing the world with this rich guy. And at some point, the rich guy dies and leaves him a nice inheritance. This guy liked Gatsby, and Gatsby learned a lot from this guy, and this guy played a profound part in his life because he was able to get an education. Well, at this time, it's around World War I, and Jay Gatsby, he is an Army officer, and it's at this time that he meets this stunning young lady by the name of Daisy. Daisy is a debutante. She is a fly chick. She is a pretty chick. And her and Gatsby are madly in love with each other. But there was only one snafu. Remember F. Scott Fitzgerald? Gatsby is a poor guy. And there's no way that this chick from old money is going to hook up with Gatsby. Her family doesn't allow it. Well, let me tell you something, folks. And I'm sure most of you older, wiser people know it. There's nothing that will motivate a man like a woman. And Daisy motivated Jay Gatsby, or The Great Gatsby, to go out and be the best version of The Great Gatsby that he could be. As a matter of fact, he was Jay Gatsby when he couldn't marry Daisy. But once Daisy lit that fire underneath his ass, he became The Great Gatsby. And as The Great Gatsby, this guy was a war hero, and he done a lot of other adventurous things that are too numerous to name. But at the end of the day, The Great Gatsby became a very, very rich man. One of the things about The Great Gatsby that I really like is he had a habit of calling everyone old sport. Let me tell you something. I've been saying old sport for a very long time. And the reason why I say old sport is because I heard The Great Gatsby say old sport. But another thing, this book is a lot about symbolism. And during this time of the Roaring 20s, the Roaring 1920s, there was a lot of money out there to be made. People were just getting rich overnight. I guess they were discovering oil, and there was a lot of other things where people were making a lot of money. I guess you would compare it to the internet boom and everybody going out to Silicon Valley and creating .com websites. this was the same atmosphere. There was a lot of money out there. But the thing about that was you had old money and you had new money. And a lot of the people with the old money that went all the way back to the Mayflower, they frowned upon the new money. So with that said, let me slow down a little bit so I can introduce some of the other characters in the book. Again, you have the Great Gatsby, for which the book is eponymously named. You have Nick Carraway, who is the paparazzi who's documenting pretty much every moment of the Great Gatsby's life. And you have the rich socialite debutante, Daisy. Now, one of the things that you should know is Nick Carraway and Daisy are second cousins, and they have a bit of a pretty cool relationship. And that is the main reason which brings Nick Carraway in contact with the Great Gatsby. Now, some of the other characters in the books are Daisy's husband, a fellow by the name of Tom Buchanan. Now, Tom Buchanan is the quintessential punk-ass white guy. He's super rich. He's super handsome. He's a football star. He's a white supremacist. You know guys like Tom Buchanan, kind of sort of like your former president. Tom Buchanan is a womanizing guy. He loves pussy. He's banging everything left and right. So the quintessential punk-ass rich white guy that does whatever the hell he wants to do. Another character in the book is the tennis star. I believe her name is Jordan. Jordan is a slick, fly by the seat of her pants type of chick, and Nick has the hots for her, but she's a little bit too on the ball for Nick, and you know Nick is a bit of a square. And but real quick, Nick is a war guy. Nick did spend some time in the war, and in fact, him and Gatsby interacted with each other during the war. So Nick is not a punk, but Nick is not the Great Gatsby. Nick is not Tom. Nick is the guy on the sidelines watching and documenting everything. But I say that to say, Nick has a thing for Jordan, and you know, Jordan is pretty much the sneaky ass white chick. She's the kind of chick that would go in a department store and switch the tags out and shoplift and do all kind of little sneaky shit. You know, white girl shit. Now, another character in the book that you should know about is a chick named Myrtle. Now, Myrtle is Tom Buchanan's side piece. And at some point in the book, just to give you an idea of the kind of guy that Tom was, Tom smacks the shit out of Myrtle and breaks her goddamn nose. Now, Myrtle is married to this guy who's very important in the story. He's a real minor character, but he's a guy, he's a simp. And Myrtle just absolutely has no respect for him. She married him out of convenience, and he's just some simp-ass guy that's taking care of her. Now, one of the things that you younger people should know, this was a time that families pretty much auctioned their daughters off. So the main reason why the Great Gatsby couldn't marry Daisy, or the Arthur Scott Fitzgerald couldn't marry the chick that he wanted, was because fathers auctioned their daughters off. You know, they wasn't just hooking you up with some average run-of-the-mill guy. If you was a Kennedy, you married a Rockefeller, etc., etc., etc. So this is pretty much what this is all about. No, you can fuck who you want to fuck, but you're not going to marry that raggedy ass motherfucker because he's not from a good family. We want to unite the family so we can unite the wealth. So it's that kind of thing. So now that we pretty much got on the same page about the outline and the characters and all of that, the Great Gatsby, after being rejected by Daisy, he went off to make his fortune so that he can have what he needed to make Daisy happy. Daisy lit a fire underneath the Great Gatsby's ass. But you know what happened though, folks? While Gatsby was off in the war, a Jody by the name of Tom Buchanan came on the scene, and he and Daisy ended up getting married. Now, Gatsby was really traumatized by this, but hey, life goes on. You might be over there fighting the war, but guess what? I'm back here on the home front. I'm having fun. This Tom guy, he's a handsome guy. He's a charming guy. This guy is from old money. He has plenty of money. He can take care of me. And Gatsby, you can't. You got to go fight a war to try to make money to take care of me. Shit, Tom got money so deep, man, you can't never stop counting it. But in the meantime, the Great Gatsby is over there becoming great. And he's not just becoming great from the war. He's becoming great from making all kinds of contacts, saving lives, keeping people safe. I mean, Jay Gatsby is the shit. And you can only see this man as being great. But the only one thing happened, folks. This is the classic textbook case of you can have all the money that you want and not be happy. And the Great Gatsby, as rich as he was not happy because he did not have the love of his life, and that was Daisy. So the Great Gatsby, he buys this mansion right next door to Daisy. And get this, folks, he starts throwing these lavish parties day after day, night after night, week after week, all with the hopes and the aspirations that Daisy, who lives right next door, will just get curious and come over to one of his parties and see him in his full splendor. I mean, Gatsby was throwing parties for people, and he didn't even like these motherfuckers. It was all about Daisy. Folks, listen. A woman can light a fire under a man's ass, and Daisy lit a fire underneath of the Great Gatsby's ass. So much so that he was spending all of this money, having all these people run in and out of his house on a regular and consistent basis. And he was doing all that just on the hopes that Daisy would come from next door and see him. And guess what? It never happened. But guess what, folks? Good news. Enter Nick Carraway. Nick and the Great Gatsby strike up a friendship. The Great Gatsby discovers that Nick is Daisy's cousin. And next thing you know, Nick ends up hooking these two up. And they got a whirlwind romance going on. And it's happening right up underneath of Tom's nose. Well, Tom don't really care anyway because he's banging Myrtle. He barely has time for his old lady. And I think one of the reasons why Daisy never went to any of the parties, because Daisy was probably quite certain that Tom could find some new pussy right next door. So anyway, now that we done tied everything in, let's get down to brass taxes. At some point, Tom discovers that Daisy and Gatsby are sneaking around right behind his back. And he suspects that Nick is in on it. Nick and Jordan. And is at this point, Tom confronts Gatsby. Well, they have a bit of a rift. They don't really come into blows. And it is at this part that one of my favorite scenes from the book and the movie, I have to share with you. Gatsby calls Tom old sport. And Tom says, "Don't you go calling me old sport. Where'd you pick that up from anyway?" Folks, you really got to read the book and see the movie. I'm just giving you an overview. But my point is, Tom confronts Gatsby and he confronts Daisy about what's transpiring. And they have a little tiff. And for whatever the reason, these guys go on a ride out in the town. And get this, folks. Not only do they go on a ride together, Tom tries to ride with Daisy in his car. And Daisy says, "No, I'm going to ride with Gatsby." Now, that was a power move right there. And Tom might be a dirty, rotten, prejudiced, white supremacist son of a bitch. But you can't help but to feel a little bit sorry for Tom to watch his old lady jump in the car with the dude that been banging her right up underneath his nose. The dude who is just as rich, who is just as fly as him. And he riding off with his old lady. Man, Tom might have been a swinger, but he didn't expect his old lady to swing. But nevertheless, man, you can't help but to feel sorry for Tom. And then, to make matters even worse for Tom, when Tom goes to town, he stops at the gas station where his old lady is. Now, keep in mind, goes back to the chick Myrtle that he's sneaking around on his wife with, and the chick who he smacked and broke her nose. Well, he goes to this gas station and to get some gas in the car, and Tom discovers that Myrtle and her husband is going to be moving out of town because Myrtle's husband suspects that his wife is sneaking around with somebody, but he doesn't realize it's Tom. This poor guy thinks Tom is his friend, but lo and behold, Tom is banging his wife behind his back. So at this point, Tom is in a panic. And again, Tom might be an egotistical, self-centered son of a bitch, but if you got a bit of a conscience, you can't help but to feel bad for Tom, because like, damn, this dude get ready to lose his wife and his girlfriend. I don't think I would like it. Well, the climax of the book comes when Gatsby tries to force Daisy to choose between him and her husband. And although Daisy might have initially had designs on leaving Tom, her loyalties eventually hold out and she stays with her husband. Hey, Daisy loved Gatsby. It was fun while it lasted. But at the end of the day, Gatsby, Tom is my husband and we got a little girl together. And I cannot be running out on my husband, no matter how much fun we have and no matter how good the dick is. Well, it is at this point that Tom has a bit of a victory. And Tom, in some real pimp shit, he said, go ahead and take her home, Gatsby. So they're all driving back to Egg, Long Island, and Daisy is so distraught. She runs over a girl and hits her and kills her. But not just any girl. This is the chick that her husband is banging on the side. So now Daisy done killed her husband's mistress. Well, what ends up happening is Tom ends up pointing the husband in the direction of Gatsby, and Gatsby ends up getting killed by the husband, and the husband ends up killing himself. It's a real sucker shit, you know. Now, the sad part of this book is you hate the fact that the Great Gatsby died, because he had put forth a whole lot of energy and effort in order to win the heart of Daisy. And even though he done a capital job of coming back into Daisy's life, he wasn't able to successfully to get her to leave her husband. Now, again, this book has a lot of symbolism. One of the symbols of the book is a person can have all the money in the world and still not be happy. And that was the Great Gatsby. He was suffering from something called oneism. What that is when a guy, he sees one specific chick and he can't focus on nobody but that chick. And that's what happened with the Great Gatsby. I mean, women were throwing themselves at him all the time, but he wasn't interested in them. He couldn't see anyone but Daisy. Again, a person can have as much money as they want, but if they're not happy inside, it doesn't mean a damn thing. And even though Gatsby always had the bright, award-winning smile, you could tell that the poor guy was miserable. To make matters even worse, out of all the people who the Great Gatsby touched and influenced and fed and let him drink his liquor and let him party at his house, will you believe at the end, only a handful of people came to his funeral? As I get ready to wrap this up, I just want to close this out by basically saying The Great Gatsby is a great book. I really enjoyed it. And it has four main themes. One of the themes is class. Old money, new money, rich versus the poor. Another thing is it's the superficial versus the truth. One of the things that you'll notice if you watch The Great Gatsby as many times as I did, you'll notice that there are a lot of people partying and drinking, but they're not having any fun. Again, you can have all the money you want, but if you're not happy inside, it doesn't mean a goddamn thing. Another thing is it's the American dream. You know, people are social climbers. People are do anything to get what they want. And this is a big part of the theme that's in The Great Gatsby. Some of the symbols in the book, it was the green light. When Gatsby moved across from Daisy and Tom, they had a green light on their dock, like a beacon or a lighthouse or something. But Gatsby would look out his window every night at this light, and this light represented hope for Gatsby or whoever. At the end of the day, folks, as I get ready to wrap this up, The Great Gatsby is one of my favorite all-time novels. It's one of my favorite stories. There's been a bunch of remakes. The most recent one with Leonardo DiCaprio, he played the Great Gatsby. And again, I can't stress enough how much I love this book. Again, I read the book maybe 50 times in my lifetime. I'll probably read it 50 more times before I end up dying. So with that said, I'm going to wrap this up. I didn't mean to be as long-winded as I did, but hey man, I'm talking about the Great Gatsby, man. I got maybe another 2 hours in me to talk about the Great Gatsby, but I know you don't have that much time. So with that said, I'm going to let you go by saying I'm done with it. Bang!
A little boy climbed an apple tree. He stole an apple, then 2, then 3. And when he started to climb back down, he slipped and he landed on the ground. Up jumped the devil, up jumped the devil. And every time he turned around, up jumped the devil in the white nightgown.